Okay, today we are working on lesson 9.7, and we're going to factor special products. I'm going to tell you this part, I'm just going to state it off, can get a little bit confusing. It's nothing too difficult. I know we can do it, but it does get a little confusing. The biggest thing is today's lesson, I'm going to compare it to, we're going to always have to factor down as far as we can. So if you think about whenever we work with fractions, we always tell you to simplify a fraction, to always go down to its lowest term. That's what we're going to look at today, how to factor it down to its lowest term. So this is where it gets a little confusing because we'll forget about a couple things. So warm up, this should only take a couple seconds. Find the product. Now these three are special. Now, we're going to talk about these, but remember, they're special. I still want you to kind of learn how they're special so you can do it easier. But if you're ever confused, don't think because it's special you have to do it this way. You can always factor it all the way out. But when I have the difference between two products where they're the exact same but they're positive and negative, remember, that means I can square my first term, so m squared, and I can square my last term, 2 times 2 is 4, and I just make it a negative. I'm doing the subtraction. I have nothing else because if we would have factored this out, it would have been negative 2m and a positive 2m, which those will just cancel each other out. So you have the difference. The shortcut is squaring the first term, squaring the last term, and making the last term a negative. If you did all the work out, it would work just fine. Now, on the second one, we have a binomial, and we're squaring it. Remember what the trick is on it. You square the first term, so 2y squared is 4y squared. I'm going to give a little space for the middle term. I square my last term. Negative 3 squared is, so we have positive 9. But my middle one, remember to the middle, you multiply what's on the inside. 2y times negative 3 is, and then we take it times 2. We double it.
Positive 36.
No.
Darn it.
That's square. Negative 12y. Now, remember, the reason for this is if we would have had this multiplied out like this, when we multiplied, switch this guy, I would have had a 2y times negative 3 is negative 6y. And this one would have given me a negative 6y. And then when you put them together, that's where you get your negative 12y. So, if I have a binomial that is squared, square the first term, square the second term, then multiply the two terms and take them times 2. Okay? If that confuses you, do not worry. Go ahead and just multiply it out like normal. Set it up, do that box method or whatever. This is just, if you start to really get a hang of it, these are shortcuts. You do not have to use them. Okay, same thing on this one. It's going to be the same thing as number 1. It's the difference of 2. So, I would first multiply, and I'd have my first term get squared. So you'd have s squared. And then I'm going to square my last term. 2t squared is 4t squared, but we have to make sure we put it as a negative. And remember, the reason is this is a difference of two multiplications. This is addition, subtraction. It will give us a negative number. The middle terms, they cancel each other out. We would have had a negative 2ts and a positive 2ts. Okay, we just want to do that so we understand which way we're going like that. We're going to go the opposite way here in a second. Today's learning goal is I can factor special products. So I would get out my foldable, and remember I'd always be putting the stuff in that foldable because, where did I put mine today? Because that's where you can always go back to and having it for your review or having it for the EOQ or EOC. Okay, the first one. We want to factor special products. This is a binomial square. Nothing too special on this one. Can anyone tell me what should we do to this to answer it? So I have y plus 7 and it's squared. What would I get for my answer? Okay, y squared 14y plus 49. Okay, how'd you guys get 14y?
Oh.
No, I said, you said 49.
You said 49.
We have 49.
Yeah, I had to get 14 more.
Yeah, the 7
Okay. 7 plus 7. So if we would have factored this out, remember the shortcut, you would have squared your first term. Y squared is y to the second power. You squared your second term. That gave us our 49, correct? But you have to have your middle term. Remember, when we take a binomial and we square it, first step, square your first one, square your last one, and then multiply the two. 7 times y is 7. And take that times 2. Remember, the reasoning why, if I work this out, let's say I use that square model a lot of you like. This would have been y and a 7. A y and a 7. Okay? So if you guys don't remember this, do this method. And when I work this out, I'd get y squared, 7y, and 49. Right here, that's why we take it times 2. Because I'm doing y times 7, which is what I said to do, y times 7. But we will have 2 of them because we had squared. It's going to double them up. Okay, how about the difference of 2 squares? What would this answer have been? Y squared minus 49. Good. Remember, in a difference of 2 squares, they're written the exact same. But since one's positive and negative, it gets rid of that middle term because they cancel each other out. Okay, here's where we're going to get into a couple things new. Is this a binomial square? Okay. Well, and they're asking you, like right now it's not. Can we factor it down to 1 is what they're asking. Now, remember, binomial square is this. Binomial, 2 of our terms, and we square them. So this is how we're going to check. Can I square that first term? Okay, so I can go ahead and say x. Okay, this was a positive 25. Okay, can I square 25?
Yes.
All right. So if I did that, would this work?
No.
Why not?
Because 5 plus 5 is 25.
Awesome. Because this is where we really have to always slow down. This is the part that gets confusing because we're looking at it like, yeah, that's a square. But if you work it out, first step, square, x squared, 5 squared. Okay, that works. But 5 times x gives me 5x. And remember, we have to take that times 2. And like you guys just said, that would give me 10x. Well, we were trying to get 25. So our answer is no. This cannot, it should have been, needs to be 10x, not 25x. Now, does that ever happen in real life? Absolutely. We'll get equations that we cannot factor down to the binomial square. We'll leave it like this. Okay? Is this a difference of 2 squares? Okay, remember, difference of 2 squares is going to be like the x plus the term, x minus a term. Can this one be the difference of 2? My biggest thing is, I look at this part. Say that again, Connor. Say that nice and loud.
So, since it's a negative times a positive, it has to be negative.
Yeah, this one's really easy. If it's a difference, that means I'm going to have a positive and a negative. When I multiply those, this term has to be negative. A positive times a negative is a negative. If this is a positive, it would be no. This is not a difference of 2 squares, because if we broke this down, we would have thought it would have been 2x plus 7 and 2x minus 7. But because of that, our 49 would have had to be a negative. So we will say no. 49 has to be negative 49. When we have a difference of 2 squares, you will always have subtraction. Okay, I added to mine before yours just a couple rules here, because this one's going to end up coming up. Factor the binomial square. We have 4 steps that we're going to do. The first step is we are going to square root the first term. So if I do the square root of 9y squared, we would get, okay, so I'm going to get 3y. And remember, they're wanting this as a binomial square. So we're having 2 terms in the parentheses and then we'll square. Second step, they want us to square root the last term. So it's the square root of 100z squared.
10,000.
No, that's if we square 100. We want to square root it. So we're going to get 10z. The third step is determine our sign. Is it positive or negative, and how do you know? How do you know it's positive? Because when we looked here, C term, just like always, if that C term was positive, that meant we were either going to have a positive, positive, or negative, negative. We looked at our B term. Since B was a positive, we would say this is a positive. So we'd have 3y plus 10z. I'm going to put it all in parentheses, and we're going to square it. The last step you need to do is check to make sure your middle number worked out. Because remember, before it did. So now we do this one. 3y times 10. I'm going to write it down here. 3y times 10z. That gives me 30yz. And then I'm going to take my 30yz, and we always take it times 2. And we get 60yz. Does that match our middle term? So that is our answer. Our answer is 3y plus 10z squared. It did work. I'm actually pretty impressed. You guys are following really well. You guys feeling okay on this? Okay. It takes a little bit of time. Honestly, what I do, whenever I get stuck, I try to rework it. I would say, to be honest, I know it'd take a lot more, but when I did this stuff, when I got my answer, I went ahead and did it again to see, did I always get the same thing? Alex? Yeah. Oh, square. This whole thing right here. That is your answer. Okay. If we look at our next one, factor the binomial and solve. So now we're going to do 2 things. First, we're going to factor it all the way down, and then we're going to solve it. I'm going to have you guys do this right now by yourselves. I'll pause the video, and then we'll come back and see how did we do. Did we able to get our answer? Alright, I'm pretty impressed with what I was seeing coming around. So First step is when we're factoring the trinomial and we're going down to a binomial, we're going to go ahead and square the first term. Most of you guys had that down. And you just went ahead and said x. X squared. That's fine. The next one is square the last term. So 64 squared is 8. Or the square root of 64. This is the part where I saw a couple little mistakes. Step 3 is determining the sign. And a lot of people just put plus 8 right away. Remember, you're looking, yes, 64 is up. 64 was a positive 64, which meant plus, plus, or negative, negative. Because B term is negative, we had to use the negative. Okay, we had to use the negative. So then we have this and it's squared, and remember this whole thing equals 0. So when I solve this, this is the nice thing about having a binomial square is I'm only going to have one answer. Because squared, I have 8 minus, or 8, x minus 8 equals 0, and I have x minus 8 equals 0. That's the same one. So I really only have to do it once. And we solve by adding 8. My answer is x equals 8. My biggest piece of advice to you is once you factor it all the way down, go ahead and do it the opposite and make sure you get the right answer. Because if you would have done x plus 8 squared, x squared is x squared, 8 squared is 64, but 8 times x would have been 8x times 2 is positive 16x. So it wouldn't work. That's how you know you made a mistake. So I'd always double check my work. Alright, factor the difference of the two squares. Remember, the difference of two squares. I'm going to look what Daddy told me right away. He told me on the last one that I had to have subtraction since it was difference. So I look at this one and it is a subtraction. So right now I'm thinking, okay, maybe it can come down. First step is I square the first term. So if I would square my first term, 121 squared is 11. Now, x squared, y squared, square root of those would be xy. And can we find the square root of 144?
Yes.
12. So one of them has to be positive 12. One of them is negative 12. That is showing me the difference. Sure. You can sit right over there. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. That is our answer. That's all there is to this one. Because they told us not to solve, they just said factor the difference of two squares. We haven't factored. Remember, the difference of two squares, the two main names that we're looking at today. We are looking at binomial square, which is this. We have two terms and we're squaring them. And the difference of two squares. Now this one says to factor and solve. So that means we're going to set them equal to 0. Correct? So, x squared minus 289. Okay, what's the first thing I check for? It's the Daddy check. What am I going to do? I'm renaming it. Everyone in math will use this from now on. What's the Daddy check? What would I have to do? Daddy, what's the check? Since it's the difference of two squares, Make sure that it is subtraction. Okay, let's set this up. Since it's going to be different, I know I'm going to have two of these. And square root of x. X. We have to have positive, we have to have negative. Can I find the square root of 289? 17. Is this my answer?
No.
Okay, so what's my next step to solve?
17, make it like x equals whatever.
Good, so we're going to make both binomials equal to 0, mainly. So I would say x plus 17 equals 0, and this one's x minus 17 equals 0. And obviously, if I minus 17, this one's a simple one. If I add 17, we get that. Well, this was x minus 17 equals 0, so I minus 17 from both sides. So x equals negative 17. I added 17 to both sides of the equal sign, so I get x equals 17. That is my answer. Okay, we're going to keep going. I know you're doing pretty good, but here comes, I think, the last two sets. Okay. This is where I'm going to trip a couple people up. Now, so we want to factor. So 25x minus xy squared. Can we factor on this one? What's wrong on this one first?
The x squared is negative 1.
Okay, this should actually be written the other way. We should actually rewrite this because this is just 25x and this is an xy squared. I'm going to put my squared first. So I'm going to rewrite this. Negative xy squared plus 25x. We want to rewrite this. We want to put it in the correct order. Remember, you want to put the biggest exponent first. Now the question is this in standard form? No, so we have to factor what out?
-1.
Okay, so let's do that. We'll take a -1 out. So now I'm going to have xy squared minus 25x. Okay. And now what we're going to ask is, this is the simplifying over and over and over. Can I simplify this part? Is there anything common I can factor out of xy squared minus 25x? I can take x out. Okay, so if I take an x out, this is going to change from -1 to just negative x, right? Because -1 times the x is negative x. So now I'm going to have negative x out. And I took the x away, so I have y squared minus 25. Because all I took out was the x. Okay. Is that my answer? Can I simplify this at all? This is just one example. This is just what we're going to simplify. Huh? Well, is this a square of binomial? A binomial square. Yeah. So that's the thing we're going to look for. When I have two terms, when I get down to two terms, I'm always going to look and say, can I take the square root of the first term? Can I find the square root of the second term? Because I can, I have to factor this down. So I am going to end up saying I still have my negative x over here. And this is going to be the difference of two squares. Y squared becomes y. and I'm going to put the y over here. 25 squared is 5, but because it was a negative, it would be a positive 5 and a negative 5. This is where it starts to get a little tricky. Nope. This is factored all the way down now. But when we looked up here, first, we had to make sure we put it in standard form. So the largest exponent came first. We factored out the negative 1, so it was in standard form. We saw common factor, we took out the x. And then we saw y squared minus 25. That should have told you right away that, hey, I'm looking, can I square the first and last term? You always are going to have to check that. So this would have been our final answer. If we try on this one, 5x squared minus 30x plus 45. Now, do we have a common thing to factor out?
Yes.
We can go ahead and take our 5 out. So that'll leave us with x squared minus 6x plus 9. Okay? Am I done?
No.
This is a trinomial. So I'm going to think from when we first did this before, can I square the first term? Can I square x squared?
Yes.
Okay. Can I square 9?
Yes.
Okay. Well, 9's a positive. 9 is a positive, which means I'm either adding 2 numbers or subtracting 2. Why subtracting? Alright, so let's break this one down then. So I would have to square root the x. So that's going to give me x. Square root my 9, which is going to be our negative 3. This 5 still has to come down. We should have that for your final answer. The 6x, remember, this goes all the way back to this step right here. Square the first term, square the last, determine the sign, double check the middle number. So let's double check our middle number. X squared gives me x squared. Square root, or find the square of negative 3. Negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9. Double check your middle number. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Times 2 is negative 6x. So x minus 3 squared was your answer, but we had factored out the 5. We're going to continually do this.
So can you tell based on a problem if it's going to be 2 equation or like 2 parentheses?
Like here?
Yeah.
For the factor? Because this was our binomial where we had it right here, y squared minus 25. And since it was squared on x, or the y and the 25, when it was minusing, that's the difference of 2 squares. Or I'm going to say difference of 2 squares.
So if it's a negative,
So think about that word. Difference, which means subtraction of 2 squares. I can square, I can square. So difference of 2 squares means difference of 2 squares. Okay? Yes.
I'm the one that we just did with the 5. That one's different than like I heard that. We need to bring down the 5 because we couldn't square it.
Because we factored it out. Because 5 was common between 5, 30, and 45. So we're going to simplify our equation first.
So if it doesn't do that, then we just
Now, well, here, we'll show on this one. Look at this one. The next one, look what's special on it. I know there's x to the 4th. But notice how many terms we have. What did we do when we had 4 terms? We factor them with hard way factoring. We can group them. Because remember that rule that, okay, when I have x minus 3 squared, when you just have x minus 3 squared, you square your first term, so x squared is x squared. You square your last term, negative 3 squared is positive 9, and then you multiply the two times. Alright, this one. Because we have 4 terms, that's what you should look for. With 4 terms, we are going to group. This was our hard way factoring. Now that I have them grouped, remember, hard way factoring is where we're going to factor something out and it's going to give us our final answer. So if I look at x to the 4th minus 3x squared, is anything common between those terms? I'm only looking at this.
X squared.
Good. Heard it? We have x squared common. So I'm going to say x squared, and then that would give me x squared minus 3. Everyone okay with that? Okay. Negative x squared plus 3. Negative 1's the only thing common. Remember, we always have to pull something out when we're doing our hard way factoring. So negative x squared plus 3. I'm going to pull out negative 1. So this would be x squared plus 3. This was our hard way factoring we did the other day. X squared minus...
X minus 3.
Oh yeah, that's okay. X squared plus 3. Here's... Or minus 3. I keep looking at it right in my head. Minus 3. These two are the same. Correct? Okay. This is going to be huge what's coming up now. So, our two equations. We have our first one. X squared minus 1. That was these two terms. And then x squared minus 3. Everyone okay? That was hard way factored. We're not done though. Look at this first one. Can I square x squared? Can I find the square root of x squared? Can I find the square root of 1? So I have to do that. This is the difference of two squares. I would say the square root of x and the square root of negative 1. So I'm going to end up with x minus 1, x plus 1. That simplified down from x squared minus 1. And then we still have x squared minus 3. We have to simplify. This is what I was telling you about. This is what we were talking about for simplifying them down all the way. Okay, I'll put it in the end. I'll finish the video for this. Your homework is worksheet 9.7. I have it. If you want it, go ahead and get it.